As long as the Union was faithful to her trust, like friends and like breeding, kind we were and just. But when the Northern treachery our rights attempt to mar, we hoist and hide the Bible flag that burst a single star. Hurrah, hurrah, for Southern rights, hurrah, hurrah for the Bible flag that burst a single star. Um, when gallant South Carolina nobly made the stand, then came Alabama and took her by the hand. Next quickly Mississippi, Georgia and Florida, all hoist and high the Bible flag that bears the single star. Hurrah, hurrah, for Southern rights, hurrah, hurrah for the Bible flag that bears the single star. Greetings. Yeah! For the South, today we are fighting for the rights of the South. The South will rise again. So, co tam jeszcze było? I wish I was in the land of cotton. Good old days are not forgotten. Look away, look away, look away, Dixieland. In Dixieland, where I was born in early on one frosty morning. Look away, look away, Dixieland. I wish I was in Dixie, hooray, hooray. In Dixieland, I took my stand to live and die in Dixie, hooray, hooray, to live and die in Dixie. Oczywiście to jest, of course, it's South. It's more South Carolina accent, but if you try to sing this, for instance, Yellow Rose of Texas, it was composed in 1850s, but it was very popular during the Civil War as well. So then you should probably do it in more Texan accent. So not South Carolina, not Alabama, but rather something like Virginia, maybe. And well, because it's named Yellow Rose of Texas, so best is of course the Texan accent. Yeah, because those the old South of the United States is so big that they have a couple of accents. Yeah, so there's a Virginia. Do I love the Union? But I love Virginia more. This is typical Virginia accent. Yeah? Never, sir. Never from America, never, sir. From Virginia. I'm a Virginian first and American second. Virginia sound. Then South Carolina, North Carolina, Alabama, Deep South. Of Alabama, South Carolina, Deep South, and Texas. Texas is a flat accent. Flat. So, there's a yellow girl in Texas I'm going down to see. No other darkies, no her, no darky, only me. Not very politically correct, isn't it? Yeah. So, yeah. I'm going now to find her, for my heart's full of woe, and we'll sing the song together that we sang so long ago. We'll play the banjo gaily, and we'll sing our sorrows air. And the yellow drops of Texas shall be mine forevermore. And some also lines from the Civil War period. And now I'm going southward, for my heart is full of woe. I'm going back to Georgia to find my Uncle Joe. You may talk of your Beauregard and sing of Bobby Lee, but the gallant hood of Texas, he played hell in Tennessee. Something like this. But usually it's totally different text. So it's usually sung like this, and this text, this lyrics is considerably newer. On the yellow rough of Texas, it's only gal I know. Her eyes are blue, even bluer than Texas skies above. Her heart's as big as Texas, and wherever I may go, I remember her forever because I love her so. And are so many roses that bloom along the way. But my heart in Amarillo, and there's where I will stay with the yellow rose of Texas. So I'd better get there fast, 'cause I know I was her first love and want to be her last. Something like that. It's usually sung in this version. Yeah, yeah, this I already sang. I wish I was in a land of cotton. Good old days are not forgotten. Look away, look away, look away, Dixieland. And this sounds better with the deep south accent. So North Carolina, Alabama. Yeah, it's better than with Texan accent. Texan accent. Uh, I wish I wasn't a bar. I wish I was in a land of cotton. Good old days are not forgotten. Look away, look a bit rusty sound, right? And better with the deep sound, deep south sound. So um, I wish I was in a land of cotton. Good old days are not forgotten. Look away, look away, look away, Dixieland. This is funny because nowadays they are producing many interesting films. There is something that started as the and could be called as the alternative right wing Hollywood, which would be located in Georgia, and sometimes it's already located there, and they are producing very interesting film and and they are producing very interesting films like God and Generals, which was also called as a fascist movie because it was said that the lefty media have said that it's propagating the southern propaganda. So yeah. And I doubt if it's really propagating anything, but this film is showing the Southern generals as deeply religious persons. And there's one general from Virginia, very, very typically deeply religious, and this is the guy who is saying in the film. Then, if there would be a union, a secession of Virginia against the rest of the Union, although it's a little bit strange to say, because as it's correctly stated by the song "Bonnie Blue Flag," the first states to secede from the Union were South Carolina and Alabama, not Virginia. But when Virginia did it, it became a serious problem because Virginia is right opposite to the District Columbia, to the place where the Washington is located, and it meant that it would be an imminent danger for the northern and the central and northern or central government if Virginia joins. So one of those generals the most I cannot always I always forget the name of the general who is the main figure in Gods and Generals. Let me do so now. It's about Thomas Jackson. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Yeah, Thomas Stonewall Jackson. Thomas Jonathan Stonewall Jackson. Yeah. So he was a deeply religious soul, and it's presented very broadly in that film. And it's funny because in the 18th century, Virginia was the most important state, and it was even a state in which the elites were not that religious. North, I think, in 18th century, the North was far more religious than the South. When you look upon the elites, when you look upon for instance, the brother Adams in the North, and when you compare those lawyers, deeply religious souls, and even if you add Pennsylvania Quakers like Mr. Dickinson and so on, and even if you add the more atheistic Benjamin Franklin to that, also from Pennsylvania, also north, and then you have a picture of well, more or less religious type of thinking, because the northern states, northern colonies were created for the religious minorities from the old country of England. So they were all well, religious dissenters. So it was very important for them to keep up the religious work. And whereas the southern colonies were mostly organized by the traders and nobility. And in the 18th century, Virginia was the most important colony, and it was typical for them to copy a little bit these cavalier ways. It means the nobility ways of life, more typical for the nobility in England. And they were not that religious. They were more earth oriented. They were more secular oriented. But when America was already created as a federal state, then the South became less and less important, and it's very typical for in the course of human history. Then when the folks are not satisfied, they usually tend to become more religious. It's a form of consolation, and so this is exactly what probably happened. Then, in course of the early 19th century, when all the trade and all the money interests were going north, and the South was a little bit overwhelmed by this process, and the Southerners became more religious in as the effect. Yeah, as the result. I mean, yeah. You This movie is a definition of lost cause myth. Well, maybe, but is that not? It's not containing such an amount of controversial things as it's said. So this movie is far less controversial than it actually is. It's it's an attempt to show how was the world view of those people, and I think it's commendable that this film is made in such a way, because we are already accustomed to the historic films about the past, and we where the all the directors are presenting uh, really the ideals of virtues of the present time, and only they are in historical customs. And so I think it's always commendable to make a film which is maybe controversial, and it will be always controversial because it would show the reality through the eyes of people of that particular period of history. So I think it's commendable, it's good, and I think that it's better to make a controversial movie than to make a boring movie about about our present times, only in historical costumes. So yeah, once again for the 1557th time. Yeah. So uh, I always observed that it's better to far more interesting those movies which are presenting the facts through the eyes of dead people, of the people of the past, like Ridicule, for instance, the French movie about 18th century, and you have all these philosophical inclinations, religious skepticism, the court intrigues, and you are in this world, in that world, not again from the perspective of our modern virtues, if we even have something like this, virtues upon which we could all well agree. fun fact: you can find on YouTube very nice music run. Okay, okay, yeah, probably, yeah. Why you are well, sir? I am a little bit shocked and confused by your nickname because your nickname says that you are not using this account anymore, but clearly you are using this account still. So what's the business with it? Popular rice producer abandoned his logo. You know which one? No, I only heard about one of the um, American football clubs, which was teams, which was called Red Inns, and there were protests organized by Native Americans, and they abandoned this. Or maybe they did not. I don't know if they abandoned it. Did not. I know nothing about the right producer. The Washington football team is a professional American football team based in Washington metropolitan area, formerly known as the Washington Redskins. Yeah, exactly. So now it's just Washington football team, not Redskins anymore. Yeah, yeah. But what was in the logo of Uncle Ben's? I don't remember. Ah, without the okay. I didn't notice it. So yeah, I didn't even. We listened, we learned, we are changing. Moving forward, Uncle Ben's will be known as Ben's Original. Yeah, that's true. This political correctness is eating everything alive, I'm afraid. Yeah, so because you are stingy with your questions tonight, I will tell us a couple things about the problem with the American Civil War. Because it's of course true that the Civil War's origin started when there was a big controversy about the slaves, of course. And of course, the people in the North were basically abolitionists. And the problem started, and the war started actually when a openly abolitionist a character named Abraham Lincoln became president. So it was a clear signal that abolition will be following shortly and slavery will be soon over. So it was a signal for the South to rebel against the. It's not that all the states who that used slave work first, they revolted. It's not that. There were two states, I think Kentucky was one of them, which did not revolt, although they used slaves. And but there is also something else because it was the dispute against Confederacy against the federalism federalistic approach. So how much the center of the political power in Washington should be influencing all. So and so it wasn't only about the slaves. And that tendency of that period is that all people in the second half
of the 19th century, also in Europe, like Giuseppe Mazzini, like Bismarck, like Camilla Cavour. They were all unifiers, so they all wanted centralized governments. Centralized governments. It seemed to be the voice of future, and the Lincoln was only one of the represented when only of one of the couple of people who were representing this tendency. So we cannot even say that he was the most important. But today, of course, we think that he was perhaps the most important because America is so damn, strong and powerful today. But in the 1860s, it wasn't that much at all. It was not America was not as powerful in, although it was impossible, and as the Alexis de Tocqueville has demonstrated already in 1830s, it was impossible to attack the United States, and it couldn't even be done by one of the superpowers of Europe like England or France. I mean, Great Britain or France, because it would mean that you would have to transport at least 2 million soldiers at once. And no European power would have such a big army. Why 2 million soldiers? Because this was more or less the capability of mobilizational capability of the United States in the 1830s, because the United States in the 1830s already reached the number of inhabitants of about 30 million. So it meant that each European power that would try to conquer the United States would have to gather at least 2 million soldiers, and it would be impossible to transport when Americans had this successful uh, short short war against Mexico in the 1840s. It was already safe generally, not just from Europe but also from Mexico. But still, the United States of America, were not by any stretch of the imagination. It was not a very powerful country, just a safe country from interventions.
How could possible men from USA live with minimum wage per hour, but for example the burgers from no, I think the burger in the McDonald's costs like $3 maybe, not 11. It's I very much doubt if the hamburger in McDonald's or McChicken or anything can cost more dollars. And which is very funny that, for instance, in people in Walmart, they are, as you probably notice, I'm speaking with the northern accent now, or the general American accent. So when it's okay, so I think that the most horrific example of the phenomenon you've mentioned, Edward Windsor, is that the Americans are who are working, for instance, in Walmart, they are getting such a low wage that they are automatically listed for social security, and for even I'm not social security, I mean from social help programs. So they are getting their wages and they are getting the social benefits too, because the wages are so very low. So yeah, but I very much doubt if the hamburger can cost like $11. Maybe in some very fancy restaurant, not in McDonald's.
hamburger cost USA. So Big Mac in USA is you would have to pay $3.79, and the cheeseburger is one of the more expensive things. So as I said, two cheeseburgers even when they are put together they cost $2. 10 chicken nuggets, not even $5. So no, there is no dish, not even the meal. I mean the set that can cost $11. So I wonder where you get this information from, that the hamburger could cost $11. As you see, it's not the case, right? You can see the link. I just pasted. No, it's not a mistake. It's interesting factor because yes, you are wrong, but it's not a problem. It's only interesting that where you got this information that it could be even up to $11. It's funny. Yeah, that would be something to pay $11 for a hamburger. That would probably mean that shall rise again. We would have an armed revolt and probably a civil war in the United States had it been true what you said. Yeah. Fortune is also one of the commentators here, right? He's also sometimes visiting my channel. What do you think about the fact that the Netherlands will allow Polish women to have abortion for free? A gesture of friendship towards Poles or an attack on peace government? Well, in the Netherlands, it's very popular to speak against Poland, as it is in Poland to speak against the Netherlands, because we would have our economical interest between our states, even if the political relations are tense, right? So it's just because we are not really cooperating militarily so much with the Netherlands, or politically apart from economy, which is basically done by private companies. So it's not even so much governments, not even so much touched by governments. So I think it results in such a reality in which it's very tempting for a Dutch politician to say some negative things about Poland, and for a Polish politician to say some negative stuff about the Netherlands. So yeah. So I think that the Netherlands have made this offer because one, the
present government in the Netherlands is the liberal government, liberal in economy, liberal in social things, and that's why it's also being consistent with their approach to society and politics. So I am not as at all astonished. And the second thing is that because we are in different region and we don't need to cooperate with the Netherlands so much for instance the military security of the region, then we can afford to criticize the Netherlands once in the um, every one and done. And I think that the Netherlands, well, it's just the same situation from their perspective. So they don't need us absolutely and always, so they can criticize us. Yeah, the same happens on the line of Madrid and Warsaw. The Spaniards are doing exactly the same. They are not really investing much in Poland, so they don't even have this economical stimulation to be on good terms. But as I already said, the Netherlands is one of the biggest investors here in Poland, and we also contribute to the economy of the Netherlands. We Poles, I mean, both as workers and as companies. But it does not. It cannot be changed only by disagreements on things concerning social standards and so on. By the way, I am totally agree on the social level with Mark Rutte and his government in the Netherlands. I am absolutely liberal in those social things. I can only regret that the opposition parties like Civic Platform and the others are not presenting any consistent strategies for the future. So I am staying with the Law and Order Party in spite of their anti-liberal social position. Yeah. So they are just we and the Dutch. We are just criticizing each other very easily because nothing much in the negative sense can come out of it as the byproduct of the situation. So. Sorry, I've got an important text. I will only text back saying that I am conducting a Q&A live. So and in a minute I will answer questions. All right. So what was the next question? Even. No, I didn't see any question about immigrants. Maybe you should rephrase it and put it again and paste it again. I think that generally Dutch language is easier to learn because you have only you don't have femininum, masculinum, and neutrum. You have only the utrum and neutrum, so only two genders.
so it helps. And the conjugation and declination is simpler. There is not so much, not so many forms of verbs, not so many. Also, the order of the sentence is easier. The only thing that could be a little bit harder is that the German is far more popular, and because of it, we are more accustomed to hear German words, and sometimes this can help. But I am thinking that it's not happening on this scale that it would really make German much more easy to learn, because it's not like it's the language containing many Latin verbs. It's the other way around. In the 19th century, the Germans were very nationalistic oriented, and they have changed many Latinized words taken from Latin, and they substituted them with the Germanic equivalents. So, for instance, it's a very typical situation when you have, for instance, in other Germanic languages. I'm not mentioning here English because English is very specific. English is very specific. It's a combination of Germanic grammar and Latinized or Latin words usually. So you can strip English, and it was done in the form of the English project with an A. How the English would look like if it would be deprived or all Latin or Romance or French and so on words. Yeah, for instance, that would be not a television set, but a Farseer, like it is Fernseher in German, for instance. So it was very interesting, and I strongly recommend you to see some materials on English. Yeah, but having that said, of course, we are living in the reality when the English language is more or less a mixture of Romance and Germanic words. So, but even if you put English out, then you would compare, for instance, Dutch and Swedish and German, and I speak all those three, especially German, so I can compare, and I will I can tell you that it's a very typical situation when you have, for instance, ambassadeur in Swedish, ambassadeur in Dutch, and Botschafter in German. It's very typical. So you have a a strongly Germanic word in German, but the equivalents in Dutch and Swedish would be far more Latinized, far more French, far more French looking or Latin looking. So, yeah. So it also helps when you are learning Swedish and Dutch, because you not only you have only utrum and neutrum both in Swedish and Dutch, because you have de and et in de boer at Kopje in Dutch, and you have Dane and Dane or det in Pasvenska, and you have bilen, den bil, car, bilen, because you put the article at the end. Bilen, it's a characteristic of Swedish language, but you have huset, et hus, then bilen, et huset. And in German, as you probably know, you have der, die, das. Yeah, three. Femininum, masculinum, neutrum. So, and you have far more typically Germanic words than in Dutch and Swedish. Far more, or far less Latin looking or French looking words. Like with the case of Botschafter ambassadeur with the O umlaut, and ambassadeur with the EU in the case of Dutch. Yeah. So German is far more widespread, and you probably you can learn in even German from international adverts. I'm sorry, it's a British term, commercials, and those commercial can, for instance, contain like Volkswagen, Fahrvergnügen, or Wir leben Autos, and so on. So we are more well, we are more presented with German language on a daily basis than with Dutch or Swedish language. But yeah, so that's the only thing that makes difference for the advantage of to the advantage of German in comparison to Swedish or Dutch. I can see you also, Stanislav, but Stanislav was referring not to his being here, not to his presence, but he was referring to the presence of his question about immigrants, and I didn't see it. So maybe YouTube did censor it. I don't know. Sometimes I think that many of the commentaries are missing, because for instance, when you include links, and when you put the link at the end of the post, then sometimes of your text, so sometimes it's going missing there. So it's better to include the link in the middle of you write something, your own words, and then you put the link, and then you add some more words after the link. It's almost, well, I'm not sure, but I think it would guarantee a better effect to go through the bots of YouTube. What's your point of view on perspective on medieval Cathar heresy? So, well, they were to some extent more progressive, because, for instance, they believed that the women and men are essentially equal. And that was probably the only culture in the medieval Europe of that particular period of time, that was for this kind of social order, that women and men are equal essentially. So yeah, it was something really. Yeah, but okay. So you didn't ask me whether it was a heresy, because yeah, it was obviously a heresy to what the church was wanted everybody to think. Yeah, so I think that they should have been left alone, but of course the all power of church would be in imminent danger, because everything based on the on this assumption that the secular powers will help the church to keep the influence. So what can I say? I can only say that their views on some social things were very interesting, and we can also presume that when you have, for instance, Jan Hus later, or Martin Luther, you can see a pattern here, that if church is pushing with their agenda too hard, then the heresy or some form of Protestantism or proto-Protestantism would come up, and that seems to be a natural order of things, that to be expecting such things. So this is what we can learn from the Cathar heresy, or they were called also Albigans or something like this. Yeah, and so this is what we can learn from Jan Hus and so on. So but we can also include, I think, for instance, this uprising in the medieval Italy of Cola di Rienzo, which was very interesting, not only because many centuries Richard Wagner, or sorry, Richard Wagner, have composed an opera, an opera about it. So Cola di Renzo was also presenting some sort of different perspective on all this churchy stuff and religious stuff. Have you heard about shitstorm between Polish anarchists from squats? So what? The Polish anarchists were fighting another group of anarchists? Well, I am not astonished because they are supposed not to believe in order, so they should be fighting all the time. Probably as individuals even. So each one against each one, every other person with anarchistic viewpoint.
Yes, I believe it's easier to get a job in Poznan than in the rest of Poland. Yes. We have only 4% of worklessness, and that means that that is almost as if only people who don't want to work are not working. All the other people in Poznan are working. Only those who are not willing to work are not working. So, and we also are depending on the stable influx of the work power from the different parts of the country. uh, if the immigrants to Europe were atheists, well, if that's an interesting question, Stanislav, because, for instance, we could easily imagine very radical Christians, even from the same parts of the world that the aggressive Muslims are coming from. So, for instance, when you put the words which are spoken by the leaders of Coptic Church, that is the sect of Christianity in the northern Egypt, where basically all Egyptians are living either in northern part of the country or alongside the Nile, because it's the only possibility, really. So if you have those, the Coptics, the Copts, the Coptic Church people, it's a couple of million of people, and they are very much, well, they are Christian, but they are still very, very radical. So there is something like the Middle East radicalism, not even withstanding if it's Christian or Islamic. So that's something, and I would hesitate to take such an aggressive Christians also a little bit. But normally we could assume that, welcoming Christians and atheists would be simpler. Yeah, but sometimes you open the gates for an immigrant who is, already very much at odds with the religion of Islam, but then his son, or knowing about his sons and daughters, knowing about their origins, family origins, they could have a totally different view on those things, and they can adopt very aggressive forms of Islam also. So it's not a guaranteed thing to accept radical Islam and having radicalism. After that, it can also not appear. But if you accept a liberal Muslim, then you cannot have also a guarantee that his children, for instance, being faced with the hardships on, for instance, the work market in the European country, would not turn to more aggressive types of Islam. It's very typical. For example, in France, it was typical to have this kind of problem. when you have accepted people from Arabic countries in the 1960s, 1970s, it was typical that you would have people who are not very Islamistic in the way of thinking, but their children and their children's children could have it totally different, and they could turn to the more aggressive form of Islam. Yes. Even if the irrational atheist, you cannot have this. You cannot have this. You cannot be totally sure if the children and the children's children will be rational atheist as well. But this is more the problem of the devil circle. We are not giving you job, then you are get frustrated, then you go to more aggressive form of Islam because it's your pedigree, it's your origin, and you turn to the tradition, and then you are at odds with all these society around you, and you blame the Christians and the atheists and les athées pour tout. So you cannot have this guarantee of because you can only pick and choose for now, not for the future. Tu peux choisir seulement pour le présent. Tu ne peux pas choisir pour l'avenir, malheureusement. Yes, it's true. I'm also very often complaining about it because most of the atheists, maybe like 60%, are people who thinking that if they toss Christianity out, if they get rid of Christianity, then they are totally irrational, and it's not the case. Usually, they usually substitute atheism. I mean, religious thinking with some other mythical type of thinking, like they are believing in conspiracy theories, or they are for aggressive ecologism or something like this. So yeah, this is a big problem because, and they are not aware of this fact because they simply assume that if they are get rid of of religion, then they are rational, and they are very much not rational, as most of also religious people are not rational, not only because they are religious, but they are usually irrational for many different sorts of reasons. So, and this is what the atheist who is getting rid of his religion is forgetting, that if he, of course, religion is not rational because it's based on faith, but it's by far, there's not a situation like this that is the only possible conviction that we can base on myths, on faith. We have many more like that. So it was even observed by a Swedish scholar that the more atheistic society, it's not even less interested in conspiracy theories, and it's not even more rational in general than, for instance, American society. Americans, when they were asked about, for instance, how many inhabitants France or Brazil has, or how much is of a problem is something, the Americans were getting better answers. Were also usually incorrect, but not as incorrect as what the Swedes were giving. You can see this very interesting lecture on the TED. The ideas worth spreading. The TED lecture, but I don't remember the title. If I find it, I will paste it under this film.
Tonight will be up to minus degree. What? Spanish lefts? No, in minus 10 degree in Spain, it's not possible, I think. Or on minus 10 degrees Celsius here. If you are talking English, so it's better to add Celsius because it's not as obvious in America. In America, they are measuring temperature with Fahrenheit, which is funny because Fahrenheit was living in the 18th century Gdansk, and he was a German ethnically, and politically he was Pole. And Anders Celsius var svensk, and and he also was living in 1400-talet in the 18th century. So it's funny that both temperature guys were 18th century guys, and only this Kelvin guy, Lord Kelvin in 19th century, but he only made a type of he only invented the type of temperature measuring for strictly scientific purposes, establishing the absolute zero, of course, right? So that's why the Kelvin grades are very Kelvin degrees are very funny. Yeah, nice to hear it, Stanislav. Nice to read it. Did Marxism really is more evil than? On paper, it's similar. On paper, it's similar because one wants conquests and the other wants revolution. So revolution must be bloody too. The Swedes were astonished with these results, but it was like a typical situation during those polls, and what was presented during the lecture. It was that the only 40% of Americans answered correctly about something happening in the world. For instance, the number of migrants between one country and another. So, for instance, we in the whole world we have today we have like 300 million migrants from one who are well suspended somewhere between nations, somewhere between borders, right? So 300 million people, and both Americans and the Swedes were thinking it's much higher number, but the Swedes were thinking about much higher number. The American number was also insanely high. It was much higher than the real number, but not as high as the number given by the Swedes. Mm. What I think of idea from the book 1984, maybe mostly it's said to be dystopia, but paradoxically, may not only Polish people could love it. For example, free, love it. For example, free flat, and they could drink alcohol at work. I don't recall any such action in this book. They've got flats, all right, but that's more like it. That's more or less everything.
I don't remember if they were drinking alcohol at work. They were, of course, totally observed all the time and so on. Is there some serious historical reason that America's metric system is so different in any aspect? Well, the thing is that America's system is not a metric system; it's a system of yards and feet, and also they have gallons and so on. So they are using basically the traditional English system of measuring. So they didn't adapt the metric system. But today, when you are today, when which is very interesting tendency, because in all the other ways the world is getting more and more American. But when you have a documentary film from the USA, then usually you will have all the details first presented in kilometers. For instance, where the Americans, for instance, NASA is makes a film about the space, then they will first give all the distances in kilometers, and then in miles and so on. I don't think much about Marta Lempart. Marta Lempart is very similar to Claudia Yahira. They are just propaganda machines for Donald Tusk, for the more radical wing of the party. Just like, for instance, Pavlovich was for the Law and Order party. What do you think about Belarus-Polish border crisis? How it's gonna? Well, I've made a separate video about it. So, yeah. I am divorced. Yes. So I am now with somebody else, with a different person now. I already was in a couple of relationships after the divorce. Well, 3, yeah, actually. Well, the Swedes are very afraid of migration, so the number they give must be high. Yes, exactly. But the Americans were also giving much higher numbers than the real numbers, but not to such an extent. And I think that the real reason is not that religion has something to do with it. So it's maybe the notion that more atheistic society is not as well informed as the highly religious, well, at least partly, society. But I think it's because the Americans are ruling the earth, and maybe they are more I don't know, more aware of some numbers, which maybe it sounds strangely, but maybe they are less exaggerating because they are more confronted with global problems. It's hard to say, for instance, but the Swedes are pretty aware of the international situation when compared to other nations. And we know also that the federal states are having they have such a complicated inner political life that sometimes they don't have any attention left for what is happening abroad. So it's hard to say what is really making the difference here: religiosity, or lack of it, or being an international player as a strong, powerful nation, or maybe being a unitary or versus federal state. I don't know. You use the term metric in the wrong way. Metric system is a system that uses meters, not yards. You mean measuring system, the distance measuring system. This is what you mean. Mon's party? I don't know what you are talking about. Dancing, having fun. Having fun. No, I will not be giving any long lecture about my personal life now. You wanted answers, so I gave it. Just plain. I remember in 1984 the main character drink gin at workplace. Well, yeah, maybe Winston. Yeah. No, no, it's not easy for me to recalculate from inches to centimeters and so on. Well, gin is basically a British vodka. It became something that we are thinking as if it were a luxury product, because in 19th century even the most plain and normal things from Britain, in this British age, the age of British dominance in culture, the dominance was so strong, and even gin and different plain normal ordinary things like that became something fashionable worldwide. But you could as easily promote grappa, for instance, the Italian vodka, in this place, and it would be the same. Programmers were using different metric. And what do you mean different metric? There is not such thing as different metric. It's a metric system or a yard system. There's no metric system. You confuse a metric with measuring system. It only proves how much the metric system is, in your brain. Oh, hello, sir. Zoomer Legion. What's your opinion about agnostic atheist mix? I consider myself something between atheist and agnostics. At atheism because God, like Jesus, seems very improbable, and agnostic because I don't know everything. Yeah, but agnosticism is, I think, some sort of weak thinking, because it's you are basically atheist, because when you think that Jesus is improbable, then you are atheist, and you only add that you are agnostic because you want to have some sort of, I don't know, some sort of backup plan, which is funny, only funny. No, you are atheist. Agnostic is only a person who basically think that there is not a big difference between being certain about the presence of God or being certain about the absence of God, which is, I think, ridiculous. All people should know that one thing. All people should decide what is more probable for them. A lot of Americans are not really that religious, even when they say they are. Yeah, I know that in America many things are regulated through churches, for instance, and churches are functioning as the places when the lectures about business strategies are also held. And I know that in America, a church can only also provide you with the insurance policy. So churches are very much engaged in into social life, especially among Protestants. But it does not mean that that the Americans themselves are as religious as they claim to be or they are believed to be. Yeah, I know. Is And in Europe, when churches are sometimes have are theoretically more engaged in the life of the nations, they are not patenting. They make no competition on the when it comes to insurance policies or some universities or things like that, education, as in America. You XYZ, you have constructed your question in the wrong way, because authoritarianism is much less despotic than totalitarianism. Totalitarianism, it means that the government is controlling pretty much everything. Authoritarianism, it means only that sometimes the democratic will of the society is dominated by some strong leader like Piłsudski or Mussolini or somebody like that. I would say that Mussolini was more of an autocrat and Hitler or Stalin more of a totalitarian dictator. Ah, there's no such being as Satan. Is there some reliable way for historians and science to study general mental health of people before 18th century? Yeah, it's a tricky question, because we have, for instance, information about the health of recruits in French armies, and only about French armies. And we know, for instance, also that how big a percentage of soldiers could sign their name. So we can also know how much of them could read and write. So so yeah, it's very hard. We only can estimate things like that. France was the first centralized government that was really creating a vast bureaucracy that was interested in many aspects of human life, and it started already in the last 2 decades of the 17th century, really. But it's the only place like that. It also explains why the French are the best historians uh, of the early modern era and the modern era. But well, yeah, but we have to make estimates. We have to build our interpretations on the diaries, on the written sources, which are, of course, anecdotal evidence, so not the strongest possible evidence. Yeah, yeah. In Poland, it's similar. Yeah, exactly. Units of measure. Yes, not metric system. Metric system is metric system. It's not the only measuring system. Yeah. Do you think that Corwin could have right that be right that our behavior to him through last year pushed him to union with Russia? Ah, you mean to behavior towards Lukashenko? No, Lukashenko was, as I already said, no, no, no. It's not true. It's not true. It never really happened. Never really happened. Belarus was always as deep as the roots of the Lukashenko's power. They were always against us. They were always making the Polish cultural events, for instance, harder to organize. They were getting rid of Polish and Latin scripts on historical buildings and so on. No, they were always against us. Of course, we were supporting the opposition, and it changed it to the worse. But he was always hostile. He was always pro-Russian, although he had he believed at first that he could have much more maneuver, but it's in relations to Russia. He didn't want to be dominated by Russia. It is ending like that, and he would probably like to avoid it, but he was never against Russia. And Corwin is, I think, on purpose making this. On purpose, he's well getting rid of this differentiation. So Corwin basically says that it's our fault, and that the Lukashenko wanted to be independent politician, and as if it would mean that he would be also independent, it would mean that he would be also anti-Russian. No, it does not mean it at all. He wanted to be not so much a junior partner to Putin as he now is, but he would be always pro-Russian and anti-Polish, and he was always like that. Well, I already made a film about Kubrick's movies. I'm a fan, not of all of them, but of many of them. So there is a film about Kubrick's movies. Yeah. Well, Britain also didn't change their measuring system, because why should it? It's in the 18th century and in the first decades of 19th century, the French were crazy invaders, so nobody agreed with them. It changed gradually, but not for the Anglo-Saxons. I am more shocked that that, for instance, the Germans or the Poles are using metric system. Then I am more shocked about this than I am shocked that the astonished or whatever that the Anglo-Saxons are not using. Biden is basically a very old guy, and he's not doing much as president. So if he does not call somebody, it does not mean so much. We can also assume that he was probably tired. Yeah, I am also getting tired. So okay, so these two questions, and then we'll see each other another time. I know that what are the difference between the both, but I heard that the only nowadays totalitarianism, not totalitarianism is North Korea, and I wanted you to let me know what's your opinion. If is China? Okay, so totalitarian. No, China is not totalitarian. China has elements of both communist views and fascist ways in its system. But basically, the party and the army, which is, I think, all soldiers have to be in the party. Well, it's easy because party is 95 million people strong, and the army not even 3 million, so it's easy. And I think it's pretty much the same body. So what you have in China is basically some sort of nobility against all the others who are controlled. So people in the party are pretty much free to do anything, and the people who are not in the party, they are second-class citizens, and they can be very easily stripped of human rights or citizens' rights and passports and possibility to travel and so on and so on, and freedom and things like that. So it is an authoritarian state, and with fascist elements. Much more worse was the slavery, of course. The apartheid, it meant only that it was basically like in what I just said about China. It's always better than to be just plainly the object that somebody else possesses. Yeah. So it's better to be a person, not an object. Okay, so no, both Obama and Trump were very vibrant. So I think it's because he wanted to be president so much. Biden was nominated, and they also didn't have any idea who to nominate really, because they Democratic Party is really split into halves. So Biden was always, because he barely knows what is happening around him. He was saying when he was in the company of the radicals, he was saying radical things. When he was in company of the moderates, he was saying moderate things. So that's why he was nominated and is president now. Yeah. Well, Hitchens was turning more and more classically liberal, so he would be probably very critical about it. He already criticized some of the left leaning. He was criticizing both Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton. The Bernie Sanders for unrealistic simplifications of a lefty, and Hillary Clinton for the gangster attitude towards business and this fund they have established with her husband. That was given with so much money of unknown origin, and probably having being a product of terrorism and things like that. No, no, no. I am not. I don't want to attack you. I just wanted to correct. Maybe you would have some benefit of my correcting you in English. Of course, I also make errors in my writing and so on, but it's not a problem, right? So it just, for me being a teacher, I am not teacher of languages, but I am a teacher, so it's totally beyond my control that I am correcting somebody. So don't be pissed about it. So please. Okay, so I think we can stop now, and we'll see each other next time. I wish you bon fin de soirée, good end of the evening, as the French say. So see you next time, and south will rise again. We'll see what the boat will be doing about it, what I just said.